Hey guys, tonight we're tossing aside the rose-tinted tapestries and stepping into the sweaty, gritty, occasionally lice-ridden world of Tudor hygiene. This was the era of codpieces, ruffs the size of dinner plates, and enough raw sewage to make even Shakespeare consider holding his breath. Tonight you'll walk the same muddy streets as Henry VIII's subjects, where soap was a luxury, baths were suspicious, and your average citizen smelled less like lavender and more like livestock, ale, and desperation. Before we dive headfirst into the communal bath bucket, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you're the kind of person who enjoys a good dose of historical grime with your content. Drop a comment below telling me where you're listening from and how long you've lasted without a shower. Now dim the lights, let your candle flicker like you're hiding from the plague, and if you're really going for authenticity, eat a chunk of hard cheese and don't brush your teeth. Let's pause for a second. Did people actually think bathing made you sick? What did a Tudor toilet look like, and where was it exactly? Were teeth cleaning methods more terrifying than effective? How often did people actually change their underclothes? And was perfume really able to cover up the smell of not having showered for over a month? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 15-something England. The streets are unpaved, the rats are thriving, and someone's dumping a chamber pot from a second-story window with absolutely zero warning. Welcome to hygiene, Tudor style. The sun creeps through your tiny window, filtered by the layer of grime on the glass, and you blink awake on a straw mattress alive with more than dreams. In Tudor England, your day begins with the sensation of straw poking your back and a familiar itch that means the lice have survived the night. You stretch, if you dare, careful not to dislodge any of the resident insects currently doing laps across your scalp. The mattress underneath you is a bag of straw, possibly hay if you're feeling fancy, and by now it has flattened into something resembling a thin layer of sadness. There's no pillow, not unless you count the slightly less pointy corner of the mattress. And the only thing softer than the bedding is the patch of dirt your toes land on when you swing your legs off the side. Welcome to morning in Tudor England. Part wake-up routine, part biological experiment. Your blanket is technically a blanket, but in reality it's just a wool sheet that hasn't been washed since the Reformation. It smells like every meal you've eaten this year, every family member who's used it, and, sometimes, the ghost of a wet sheep. It's heavy with the weight of months, maybe years of accumulated life. And as you fold it back, a puff of mystery dust rises, catching the morning light and floating gently through the room like a warning. The room itself isn't much bigger than a modern walk-in closet, and you share it with at least 3 other people, 2 of whom are snoring loud enough to rattle the single sooty window pane. If you're lucky, you're in the middle of the family pile, shielded from the drafts by a human sandwich of relatives, all equally fragrant, all equally determined not to sleep next to the wall. The wall, you see, is the cold zone, the draft. The place where even the bravest toes fear to tread. You glance down and discover, once again, that your feet are caked in last night's dirt. Socks are a privilege, shoes are optional, and the floor is simply an extension of the yard. Any hope of waking up fresh evaporates when you realize the dog, who doubles as an early warning system and a portable foot warmer, has left you a gift right next to the straw tick. It's a scent that pairs exquisitely with the aroma of stale air, sweat, and whatever passed for last night's supper. The house doesn't have bedrooms. It's just one big room where everything happens, sleeping, eating, and arguing about who's supposed to empty the chamber pot. Privacy is a luxury for the upper classes. Here, you wake up to your father's snoring, your mother's elbows, and the gentle symphony of distant church bells that mean it's time to get moving, or at least to contemplate pretending you're still asleep. Some mornings, if it's cold, you wake up with your breath puffing little clouds in the air. There's no fireplace in the sleeping area, just the vague memory of warmth from a dying fire in the next room. Frost forms on the inside of the window, and if you're lucky, only a little bit on the inside of your nose. Your morning routine consists of wriggling back into yesterday's clothes, which you slept in for both warmth and lack of any alternative, and taking inventory of how many of your toes you can still feel. Now comes the first big decision of the day. Do you face the cold to wash your face in icy water fetched from the outdoor well, or do you rely on what can only be described as historical dry shampoo? A vigorous shake and a silent prayer? Most days, you go for the shake. Tudor water isn't famous for its cleanliness, and you can't afford to use more than a handful for washing. Anyway, maybe you pick a stray bug or two out of your hair. Maybe you just accept that they're coming with you for the ride. Before you can even think about breakfast, there's the chamber pot situation to deal with. A delicate operation that involves balance, aim, and the hope that no one is watching. The air in the room thickens as the pot is shuffled around, reminding everyone that hygiene is more suggestion than rule. There's no time for embarrassment, only efficiency. You dump the contents outside, not so much disposing as contributing to the neighborhood ecosystem. If you're lucky, the day starts without any disasters. If you're less lucky, there's a puddle in the straw or a rat in the grain bin. Either way, the morning is a lesson in low expectations and resilience. By the time you stagger out into the courtyard, blinking against the daylight and brushing off as much filth as possible, you're already tired. And it's only sunrise. And that, in Tudor England, is a good start. Because if you woke up, most of your family woke up, and nothing is actively on fire, you're already ahead of the game. The day will only get dirtier from here. You stumble to the washstand, if you're lucky enough to have one, and confront your teeth, an assortment of brownish pegs, caked in yesterday's pottage. Your toothbrush? A stick. Your toothpaste? A little salt, some soot, and a prayer for mercy. Dental hygiene in Tudor England is not for the faint of heart, or for anyone especially attached to the idea of fresh breath. You take a moment to size up the enemy in the warped piece of metal or cloudy bit of glass that passes for a mirror. Every tooth tells a story, and none of those stories end well. There's a molar that's only half there, a canine with a suspicious wobble, and a gap where your favourite snack, dried peas, once did irreparable damage. The best you can hope for is to keep most of your teeth in your mouth until at least your 30th birthday, which, if you're counting, is the Tudor version of hitting retirement. Your dental toolkit is refreshingly simple, if not effective. The classic option is a chew stick, just a green twig from a hazel, willow, or apple tree, chewed until the end frays into a kind of primitive brush. You scrub your teeth as best you can, occasionally pausing to dig out a chunk of mystery meat from a molar, or, if you're feeling ambitious, to jab at your gums until they bleed. Blood is a sign it's working, right? Modern mouthwash commercials could never. If you're rich, or at least slightly less poor, you might splash out for a bit of imported linen to rub your teeth with. For everyone else, there's always the fallback, the corner of your sleeve. Actual toothpaste is a DIY affair, a dash of salt for scrubbing, soot from last night's fire for whitening, and maybe some dried sage if you're feeling fancy. The resulting mixture tastes like defeat and regret, but it does technically get the job done. Or at least, it convinces you that you tried. But don't get too attached to your teeth. In a world before fluoride, plaque is less of a problem than the daily assault from gritty bread and unfiltered ale. Everything you eat comes with a side of something crunchy. Bits of stone from the grinding mill, tough grains, even the odd piece of sand that made its way into the dough. Each meal is less of a feast and more of a dental obstacle course. You bite into your breakfast bread, feel something crack, and hope it's just the crust. Gum disease is rampant, but in Tudor England, it's called life. Red, swollen gums are as much a part of your morning routine as scratching your scalp. If your teeth start to loosen, you don't bother a dentist. There isn't one. Instead, you might see the local barber surgeon, whose qualifications include both has a sharp knife and isn't currently drunk. Extraction is the one dental service universally available. Grip, twist, pull, and hope you don't pass out. Anesthesia is a mug of ale and some very loud swearing. Toothaches are legendary. The medieval solution? Clove oil, if you can get it, or a hot poultice pressed against your jaw until the pain subsides or you forget which side hurts. Some folks tie charms around their necks, convinced that a dried frog, pressed clove, or prayer will scare the ache away. You might try to ignore it, chewing on the other side and pretending you aren't one bad day away from soup for every meal. And don't think anyone's breath is better than yours. Halitosis is the national anthem. Between rotting food stuck in gaps, gum infections, and the diet of onions and beer, everyone's breath is a little bit medieval. Courtship is less about sweet nothings and more about avoiding direct exhalation. Still, there are perks to this rustic routine. For one thing, sugar is scarce for most of the population, so your teeth aren't being dissolved by sweet pastries unless you're royalty, in which case, enjoy your blackened molars. And if you do lose a tooth, you can always claim it was a jousting accident or the result of a heroic brawl with a stubborn carrot. By the time you finish your morning scrub, you've probably done more harm than good. Your gums are raw, your teeth ache, and the taste of burnt salt lingers like a warning from the future. But you smile anyway, because everyone else's teeth look exactly the same, or worse. Congratulations, you've survived another day of Tudor dental hygiene. Just try not to smile too wide. Splashing your face is optional but highly recommended if you want to avoid the sensation of your skin peeling off in thick flakes. Washing hands, on the other hand, is mostly reserved for those who can afford extra water or who just lost at dice. Welcome to the thrilling world of Tudor skincare, a never-ending compromise between what's hygienic and what's available, with a strong dash of maybe nobody will notice. In the morning, if you're feeling ambitious, you'll dip a cupped hand into a bowl of water that's seen better days, probably shared by the whole family and the odd curious chicken. The water is icy in winter, barely above lukewarm in summer, and always just murky enough that you spend a moment debating whether it's cleaner than your actual face. There's no plumbing, no running tap. If you want water, you, or someone you love less than yourself, has to haul it up from the communal well, which is conveniently located about 100 steps farther away than you'd like. On a good day, you'll fill a bucket or two and ration it out for cooking, drinking, and whatever constitutes washing in your house. Personal cleanliness is always in competition with boiling pottage and staying hydrated. Sorry, hands. Better luck next century. Face washing, then, is a ritual more symbolic than effective. A quick splash, a swipe with the edge of your already damp sleeve, and maybe a dab of lard or goose fat if your cheeks are feeling particularly scaly. Soap exists, but it's a last resort. Made from animal fat and lye, and if you've ever wanted to know what it feels like to sandpaper your face, this is your chance. Most people save soap for laundry, or the very occasional, deeply regrettable full-body wash. For the ambitious, or especially dirty, there's the medieval exfoliation technique. Simply rub at your face with a rough linen cloth or a fistful of straw. Bonus points if the straw is still warm from the livestock. The effect is something between a refreshing scrub and a gentle attempt at removing your own skin. In summer, if you work in the fields, your face will be caked with dust, sweat, and the mysterious substances floating on the breeze. By harvest, the sun has baked a semi-permanent mask onto your cheeks, and you just tell yourself it's protection from the elements. Hand washing is a delicate, almost ceremonial affair, one you might only undertake before a particularly important meal, or if your hands are physically stuck to one another. There's a reason forks never really caught on for the lower classes. Everyone's hands are already halfway to becoming an extra layer of glove. The nobility sometimes set out fancy bowls for guests to rinse their fingers in before eating, but for everyone else, it's a matter of brush off the worst of it and hope the bread is harder than the dirt. And even then, there's a hierarchy of filth. Farmers might only wash their hands when the mud starts to interfere with buttoning their tunics. Bakers have an excuse. Flour cleans everything. Smiths have hands so blackened with soot, washing is purely for show. Children, meanwhile, consider dirt just another toy, and you're more likely to see them licking their fingers than scrubbing them. If you're sick or superstitious, or both, there's an extra layer of caution. Many Tudors believe that washing too often actually opens the pores and invites illness, so the truly health-conscious might avoid water altogether, except in emergencies. Instead, they'll opt for dry washing, a brisk rub with a clean cloth, a dusting of flour, for the fancy, or a wipe down with a sprig of rosemary, which doubles as perfume and keeps the neighbours guessing. As the day wears on, you accept that grime is a fact of life. The only real incentive to wash thoroughly is if the parish priest is expected for supper, or if your hands have become so sticky that the local flies have begun to organise community meetings. But even then, there's only so much you can do with half a bucket of grey water and a will to live. So you carry on, hands caked in whatever the day's work has provided, face flushed with the effort of pretending you washed, and spirits undampened by the crusty residue of existence. It's the Tudor version of self-care. A splash, a scrub, a shrug, and the comforting thought that everyone else is just as grimy as you are. After all, in a world where nobody's clean, who's really dirty? Laundry is a group project, and your bed linen is washed so rarely that it has its own ecosystem. Sharing a bed means sharing everything: warmth, lice, and the constant suspense of waking up with someone else's elbow in your ear. In Tudor England, your bed isn't a private oasis. It's a team sport with questionable rules and even fewer boundaries. The idea of your own bed is as far-fetched as having your own toothbrush or a hot shower on demand. The average family bed is a sprawling, multi-generational tangle of limbs, blankets, and arguments over who kicked whom in the middle of the night. Personal space is a myth. The only boundary is how long your arm is when you need to push a snoring sibling off your pillow. Your sheet, a once white square of linen, tells the story of every family meal, spilled ale, and muddy foot that's ever passed through the house. It's not so much laundered as aired out on the occasional sunny day, where it's draped over a bush to let the wind do what a bar of soap cannot. The scent of fresh air and wildflowers quickly gives way to the unmistakable undertone of wet dog, cheese, and whatever it is that makes old linen smell the way it does. The only real wash it gets is when the rain surprises everyone and leaves it out on the line for a medieval rinse. Laundry day itself is a neighbourhood event, because scrubbing a sheet by hand is a challenge that takes time, muscle, and a strong stomach. First, the water must be fetched, usually from a well or, for the lucky, a nearby stream. Then comes the soap, a pungent, homemade concoction of animal fat and ashes that is less gentle on fabrics and more willing to burn through anything. Linen is beaten, thrashed, and wrung until it's more battered than clean. If you're lucky, the stains fade a little. If not, you just turn the sheet over and hope for the best. But why bother? It's not as though you're sleeping alone. The real warmth in winter comes not from your single threadbare blanket, but from the 3 or 4 other people crammed into the bed with you. Parents, children, elderly relatives, and even the occasional guest or stray animal all pile in together, creating a patchwork quilt of humanity. If you're in the middle, you're warmest, and least likely to fall out. If you're on the edge, you spend the night defending your half of the blanket from cold drafts and wandering feet. The best part? The wildlife. Every Tudor mattress, if you can call it that, is a haven for lice, fleas, and a host of tiny creatures that have made the leap from house pet to roommate. You get used to the occasional crawling sensation on your scalp, and midnight bug squashing becomes as routine as fluffing your pillow. Flea combs are communal, and conversations about who gave whom what kind of rash are surprisingly casual. Everyone's got something, so nobody's really embarrassed. The real scandal is being so clean you make everyone else itchy by comparison. Nighttime in a Tudor bed is full of surprises. The sudden elbow in your rib cage, the shifting mattress straw poking through the sheet, the realization that someone has claimed your favourite spot. The lucky few might get a little privacy, a thin curtain or a separate straw pallet, but most people just accept that their dreams will always involve other people's snoring. And if you're really unlucky, you wake up face to face with the family goat, who snuck in for warmth and left you a special gift at the foot of the bed. Changing your linen is a semi-annual event, usually reserved for when the sheet develops a visible personality or begins to attract more bugs than people. Underclothes, too, are a rare treat, changed just often enough to prevent a mutiny. The goal isn't cleanliness so much as less dirty than yesterday. If someone in the village has recently washed their sheets, word spreads fast, and neighbours drop by just to see what clean linen actually looks like. Still, there's something cozy about it all. Shared warmth, whispered bedtime stories, the odd midnight giggle. These are the moments that bind a Tudor family together, even if they're also bound by lice and questionable odours. You may never sleep alone, but at least you're never lonely. And if you wake up every morning just a little more resilient and a little itchier, you can always take comfort in knowing that tomorrow night you'll do it all again, elbows, germs, and all. Nature calls, and Tudor plumbing answers with a ceramic pot under the bed. The real trick is getting to the privy before the neighbours do, or mastering the art of the discreet window toss onto the unsuspecting street below. If you're hoping for any privacy, forget it. Chamber pots are as common in Tudor households as gossip, and just as likely to get you in trouble if you're careless. As dawn breaks, the quietest moment in the house is when everyone pretends not to hear the telltale scrape of someone shuffling out the chamber pot for the day's first deposit. It's a communal silence, marked by forced politeness and silent prayers that whoever used it last had good aim. For the uninitiated, the chamber pot is both hero and villain, indispensable for midnight emergencies, but a constant source of anxiety by sunrise. Most are plain clay, occasionally decorated if your family is feeling extravagant or wants to impress company with its nice pot. The fancier the household, the bigger and more intimidating the chamber pot, sometimes large enough to warrant its own gossip. You haven't truly made it in Tudor society until your chamber pot is rumoured to have once belonged to someone with at least 3 titles and a regrettable digestive history. Once you've handled your business, hopefully, without toppling the pot or attracting an audience, the next step is disposal. Here the real sport begins. Do you risk carrying it through the crowded main room? Or take the shortcut and toss it out the window with the traditional warning shout? The well-mannered will holler "Garde l'eau," watch out for the water. But most mornings, you simply hope for good luck and fast reflexes from anyone strolling below. If you've ever wondered why people wore hats in old London, now you know. They were less fashion statement, more personal umbrella. There's always the option of the backyard privy, a wooden hut or small brick structure that has seen more use and less maintenance than any other part of the home. You make your way outside, balancing your ceramic burden like a contestant on a Tudor obstacle course, dodging mud, chickens, and that one spot where the ground is always suspiciously soft. Once at the privy, you're greeted with the aroma of several generations' worth of early morning adventures. If you're lucky, the seat is only a little damp from dew, or possibly something else. The art of squatting over the pit, holding your breath, and keeping your feet from falling asleep is a skill honed by necessity, passed down from parent to child like the family stew recipe. Of course, the real challenge is timing. Everyone in the house and half the neighbourhood seems to need the privy at exactly the same moment. You stand in line, clutching your pot and your dignity, pretending you're above the chaos while trying not to make eye contact with the person in front of you. The morning rush is more intense than the market on fair day, and 10 times as fraught with peril. If you dither too long, you risk an accident, or even worse, the shame of being the cause of a spill. In Tudor times, your reputation is built on your ability to hold it until your turn. For city dwellers, things can get even more exciting. If you're in a cramped tenement, the communal privy is several flights down, past neighbours who are equally desperate. Navigating the narrow, rickety stairs with a full chamber pot in one hand is the Tudor equivalent of an extreme sport. One false step and your entire morning, and everyone else's, takes a turn for the catastrophic. If you're feeling competitive, some families pride themselves on their tossing technique, an underhanded art involving perfect aim, ideal angle, and nerves of steel. The chamber pot toss is best done with a steady hand and a reckless disregard for the people in the street below. This tradition, more than anything else, explains why most Tudor towns smell like a cross between a brewery, a petting zoo, and a very determined cheese. Once your chamber pot is empty and your conscience is relatively clear, you give it a quick rinse, if you have the water to spare, or simply pop it back under the bed for its next heroic appearance. It's a cycle as predictable as sunrise, proof that in Tudor England, necessity is truly the mother of invention and lower back pain. And as you rejoin your household, you remember, for all the misery, embarrassment, and awkward encounters, the chamber pot is what stands between you and the wild unpredictability of Tudor sanitation. That, and a good sense of humour, will get you through almost anything, provided you watch your head the next time you pass beneath an open window. You shuffle to the backyard privy, a wooden hut perched over a pit. It's a race between privacy and survival, as you balance over a chasm of horrors, praying nothing reaches up from below, least of all last night's dinner. This is where true Tudor courage is measured. Forget jousting or facing down the local tax collector. The real test of fortitude is the daily pilgrimage to the family privy, armed only with a shaky sense of balance and the hope that no one has beaten you there. The privy is often located as far from the house as your nose can convince you to build it, but close enough that a midnight dash in winter doesn't result in a tragic frozen-in-place scenario. The approach is always muddy, sometimes suspiciously so, and is haunted by chickens, geese, and whatever creatures have decided that the aroma makes a perfect meeting place. Once inside, the privy welcomes you with all the charm of a crypt. The air is thick, the seat is questionably damp, and the darkness below is both literal and existential. You lower yourself, hoping the wood holds, and try not to think about what might be lurking underneath, because rats, frogs, and even the occasional snake see the pit as prime Tudor real estate. On cold days, the seat chills you to your soul. On hot days, it's a sauna of regret and swarming flies. The only constant is the sense that privacy is as thin as the walls, which are generously ventilated by missing planks and gossiping neighbours. The Tudor privy is democratic, in the worst possible way. There's no such thing as a private bathroom. The best you can hope for is to take your turn without an audience, although there's always someone who will rap on the door asking, "Are you done yet?" long before you actually are. For families with little time to spare, some brave souls simply accept the group experience, perching side by side like reluctant birds, making small talk and trying to ignore the soundscape of discomfort. And then there's the matter of wiping. Toilet paper hasn't yet made its grand entrance. Instead, you reach for whatever's handy, a handful of straw, a rag that's seen better centuries, or, if you're truly unlucky, a smooth stone that you pray is actually a stone. Sometimes, a communal wipe stick does the job, rinsed off in a bucket and shared between users with a grim sense of camaraderie and exactly zero hand sanitizer. For city dwellers, the experience is somehow both grander and more horrifying. Public latrines are large, stone-lined benches with a series of holes and a very public atmosphere. You might find yourself shoulder to shoulder with strangers, discussing the weather while pretending not to notice each other's business. The real danger, aside from the sights and smells, is slipping, either literally, thanks to the ever-present puddles, or socially, by failing to observe the unwritten etiquette of not staring, not judging, and not overstaying your welcome. The closer your home is to the centre of town, the more likely your waste finds its way to the open sewer running down the middle of the street, sometimes used by the local pigs as a personal snack bar. In castles, things are fancier but not necessarily better. The garderobe is a stone or wooden bench set into the wall, with a chute leading straight down into the moat. The good news? Gravity does the hard work. The bad news? The moat is now the least romantic water feature in history. During a siege, attackers might even try to climb into the castle by way of the garderobe, which means you have to worry not only about what's coming out, but what might be coming in. No matter your status, using the privy is always an adventure. There's the constant gamble of whether the pit has been recently emptied a rare and thankless job reserved for the bravest or most desperate. If it hasn't, the aroma builds up until even the neighbour's goat refuses to go near it. And heaven help you if you drop anything important down the hole. The phrase "let it go" has never been more relevant. Finally, there's the return journey. Hands quickly brushed off on your tunic, trying not to breathe in too deeply, and re-entering the house with the air of someone who's survived a minor ordeal. The privy is a daily reminder that, in Tudor England, dignity is always negotiable, and hygiene is mostly a battle between you and your own determination not to look down. So, if you think waiting for the bathroom at a music festival is bad, just remember, at least you don't have to check for rats or defend your territory with a stick. Progress smells a little sweeter every century. If you're wealthy, your answer to the stench is simple: drown it in perfume. Musk, rosewater, and crushed herbs waft through court, but nothing truly masks the scent of 1,000 unwashed armpits in the heat of summer. In Tudor England, hygiene is less about cleanliness and more about clever illusions. The upper crust have figured out that if you can't banish the odor, you can at least confuse the nose with something stronger. Every wealthy lady and lord keeps an arsenal of aromatic weaponry: little bottles of scented oils, velvet pouches of dried lavender, handkerchiefs dabbed with rosemary, and tiny pomanders filled with whatever passed for refreshing in the 16th century. If you're especially fancy, you might wear a locket stuffed with cloves and cinnamon, swinging it under your nose every time you pass a particularly aromatic member of court, which is, let's be honest, everyone. The richer you are, the more extravagant your scent collection. Imports from distant lands, ambergris from the intestines of whales, civet from the glands of cats, sandalwood shipped in from the east. Decorate your dressing table. Rosewater is dribbled everywhere. In the bath, on the hair, down the front of your best shirt, and occasionally straight into your drinking water. Because if your mouth isn't fragrant, what's the point of being alive? Musk, spicy and overwhelming, is dabbed behind ears and on wrists, meant to signal wealth, sophistication, and the ability to smell only what you want to smell. But the magic only goes so far. Tudor perfume technology is up against formidable odds. Woolen gowns never washed, starched ruffs reeking of old sweat, and the ever-present tang of chamber pots and body heat. In a crowded hall, the atmosphere is best described as floral bouquet in a livestock barn. The resulting olfactory experience is dizzying, and even the most determined nose eventually surrenders. No matter how many petals you pin to your sleeves, the underlying aroma of courtly summer still wins the day. Perfume isn't just for social show-offs either. It's believed to have health benefits. Many people are convinced that pleasant smells protect you from illness, especially the terrifying bad air or miasma blamed for everything from headaches to the plague. If you can afford it, you'll carry a sweet-smelling nosegay or tussie-mussy, a small bouquet of herbs and flowers clutched in your hand or pinned to your clothing, ready to be buried in your face when something or someone unspeakable drifts by. Doctors walk around with masks full of spices just to make their daily rounds bearable. The fantasy of perfume as a magical barrier to filth is everywhere. Noblemen splash their boots with rosewater before entering the hall. Noble women sprinkle their undergarments with violet powder. Even the walls are scented. Tapestries are infused with herbs, and bowls of potpourri sit strategically around the room, bravely fighting a losing battle. Before important feasts, servants scatter fresh rushes or sweet-smelling hay on the floor, hoping to mask the worst of the dirt and, more optimistically, to keep guests from noticing when something crawls out from beneath the table. The best perfumers are alchemists in their own right, mixing and matching whatever exotic ingredients they can get their hands on. Recipes are family secrets, handed down with the seriousness usually reserved for titles and land. Woe betide the courtier who turns up with the wrong scent, too strong, and you're suspected of hiding something, which you are, too subtle, and you're accused of neglect. The true art lies in striking that delicate balance between ethereal and what died in here. Still, All the perfume in Christendom can't change one stubborn fact. Underneath the silk, velvet, and fancy embroidery, everyone sweats the same. There's a certain democratic equality in odor that even Henry VIII's gold-plated rosewater can't quite defeat. The result? A Tudor ball is less of a fragrant fantasy and more of a polite arms race, with everyone trying not to flinch as the king's favoured mistress glides by in a cloud of frankincense and week-old socks. And as you waft your own scented handkerchief discreetly over your nose, you remember it's all just theatre. The rich may smell more expensive, but in the great contest of Tudor hygiene, nobody's actually winning. The only real luxury is having something, anything to sniff besides the truth. Bathing is an event, not a routine. Soap is precious, made from animal fat and lye, and it's as rough on your skin as Tudor politics. The result? You're cleaner, but also redder, and possibly missing some freckles. In Tudor England, the decision to wash your whole body is not taken lightly. It's a major production, somewhere between organising a village fair and declaring bankruptcy. You don't simply wander into a steaming shower and emerge 10 minutes later humming a tune and smelling like a midsummer garden. No, bathing means you've spent the better part of a day preparing, fetching water, lighting fires, and wrangling with a wooden tub that leaks with every breath of wind. Let's start with the water. Most households have no indoor plumbing. Water has to be drawn from the well, river, or, if you're truly out of luck, a rain barrel that's doubling as a mosquito breeding program. Hauling buckets back and forth takes muscle, time, and a strong will to live. By the time you have enough water for a bath, you're already sweaty enough to make another bath seem necessary. Once the tub is filled, and you've accepted that most of the water is now on the floor, it's time for soap. Don't imagine bars of lavender-scented luxury. Tudor soap is a harsh, crumbly substance made from rendered animal fat mixed with caustic lye. It's technically cleansing in the same way a scouring pad technically exfoliates. After a good scrub, your skin feels both clean and slightly alarmed. Red patches are normal, so is a faint whiff of mutton. If you're out of soap, or, heaven forbid, too poor for the stuff, improvisation is the order of the day. Soot from the hearth can be rubbed into especially stubborn stains, which works as long as you don't mind looking like you're preparing for a mime audition. Sand is another classic scrubber. It's plentiful, cheap, and guaranteed to get into every conceivable crevice, making you question whether being clean is really worth the effort. For the most part, the aim is to remove only the worst of the visible grime and hope the rest is character building. The frequency of bathing depends on your wealth, status, and willingness to risk your health. Many Tudors believe that too much washing actually weakens the body, leaving you open to disease. After all, a layer of protective filth keeps out the evil spirits, or, more realistically, the worst of the Tudor air. Most people stick to washing their faces, hands, and, if it's been a very good year, their feet. Full-body baths are reserved for special occasions, religious festivals, and when you absolutely have to. If you're lucky enough to live near a bathhouse, things get interesting. Communal bathing is all the rage among city folk, mixing cleanliness with scandal and a healthy side of local gossip. Bathhouses range from respectable establishments where you pay a penny for hot water to places that offer extra services and attract the attention of the local clergy. They're often closed down for being dens of iniquity, though no one mentions the far greater risk of catching athlete's foot from the neighbour. After your scrub, it's time to dry off. Towels are rare and precious, usually shared, and you're as likely to dry yourself with a shirt as with anything designed for the purpose. Some simply drip dry by the fire, wrapped in whatever's handy. You emerge from your bath with raw skin, a sense of accomplishment, and a list of new places that now itch. Then comes the best part, emptying the tub. The water, now the colour and consistency of weak stew, gets tossed out the back door, splattering across the garden and ensuring that, for the next week, the cabbage patch smells faintly of defeat. Bathing in Tudor England isn't just about getting clean. It's about reminding yourself that survival is a series of small victories. Sometimes, victory is just scrubbing off the day's dirt without scrubbing off your dignity. You may not shine, but at least you're red and tingling. And if anyone asks, just tell them it's the healthy Tudor glow. Public bathhouses are where hygiene meets gossip and possibly syphilis. Stripping down with neighbours is normal, but so is catching the latest rumour or an inconvenient rash. If you're in a Tudor town, chances are you've heard the siren song of the local stews. Not the kind you eat, but the kind you soak in. Bathhouses, affectionately called stews, are equal parts cleaning facility, social club, and rumour mill. For a few pence, you can bathe, steam, and leave with your skin only slightly traumatised by the company, the water temperature, or both. If you're lucky, you'll leave cleaner than you arrived. If not, you'll at least have a story to tell. The process starts with humility. You strip down in a candlelit anteroom, modestly shielded by a threadbare curtain that hides nothing from anyone who cares to look. Everyone's in the same half-naked boat: merchants, apprentices, the butcher's daughter, and that neighbour who seems to attend mostly for the conversation. It's oddly liberating, a communal shedding of both clothes and dignity. Forget any notions of privacy. You are about to get very familiar with the birthmarks and conversation habits of your entire street. You and your fellow bathers step into a large wooden tub, or if you're feeling flush, into a private alcove barely separated from the main room. The water is warm, if the fire's been kept stoked, and usually cloudy with a mix of soap, sweat, and, on busier days, optimism. Bubbles, if they exist, are courtesy of lye-heavy soap and not anything resembling modern spa luxury. This is where the real cleaning happens. You scrub, scrape, and splash, occasionally swapping tips on stain removal or exchanging the latest town news. Who's courting whom, who's fallen ill, who's had a falling out with their in-laws. No secret is safe when half the parish is naked and full of opinions. If you want to know who's just come into money, watch for the person with the fanciest bath sponge or the softest linen towel. Social status is measured in soap, and the best rumours float as freely as the scum on the water. It isn't all innocent fun, though. Bathhouses have a reputation for less wholesome activities. There are corners where the water is hotter, the talk more flirtatious, and the boundaries a lot more flexible. If the local priest comes by to remind everyone about moral standards, you can bet there's a side room somewhere that's already one step ahead of his lecture. Scandalous liaisons are so common that more than one bathhouse has been shut down by order of the town council, only to reopen later under a new name, with the same bucket of water. But the real risk isn't the rumour, it's what's left in the tub after the gossip fades. Communal bathing is a breeding ground for rashes, itches, and the occasional unwelcome passenger. You might enter the bathhouse hoping to lose your dirt, but you could come home with a rash, a cold, or, for the especially unlucky, something you'll be telling your barber surgeon about for months. Some folks swear by adding herbs like rosemary or sage to the water in the desperate hope it kills whatever the last customer left behind. Despite the risks, bathhouses are popular, especially for those who don't have the resources to haul, heat, and guard enough water for a private bath. For many, it's their only real chance to get properly clean, or at least cleaner than usual. You'll spend an hour or two soaking, then drying off with whatever you remembered to bring spoiler. It's never enough. Before heading home, red-faced, wrinkled, and slightly paranoid about that new itch behind your knee. By the end of your visit, you're thoroughly scrubbed, scandalized, and up to date on every local intrigue. Bathhouses are the pulse of Tudor towns, mixing community, cleanliness, and chaos in a way no modern gym or salon can ever replicate. If you manage to leave with only a few fresh rumours and all your original skin, consider it a win. And when you return to your own bed, still warm from the company of a dozen strangers, you realise something strange. For all its risks, there's a comfort in knowing that you're not alone in your dirt or your questionable life choices. In Tudor England, that's about as clean as it gets. If you're lucky, you have a linen shift. If not, your outer clothing does double duty. Either way, changing your undergarments is considered an act of wild extravagance, twice a month if you're truly reckless. In Tudor England, underwear is the unsung anti-hero of hygiene. Mostly invisible, mostly neglected, and only slightly more present than the concept of deodorant. For most people, the linen shift or shirt is the closest thing to a base layer, an all-purpose, one-size-fits, nobody garment that's worn day and night, winter and summer, for work, sleep, and awkward dinner parties. It's the garment that never leaves your body, except for those rare, almost celebratory moments when laundry day arrives and you find yourself naked and free, if only for a panicked 15 minutes. Let's be honest. If you're a commoner, you're not strutting around in matching sets of Calvin Kleins. Your underwear is whatever you can keep between yourself and the woolen outer garments that are one part clothing, one part medieval exfoliating device. For women, the linen shift is practical, softens the scratch of heavy skirts, and, if you're in polite company, prevents total scandal in the event of a wardrobe malfunction. For men, the long shirt does the trick, occasionally accompanied by some laced-up breeches if you're feeling especially modern. But let's not kid ourselves. On a hot day, everyone's tempted to go commando. Changing your undergarments, meanwhile, is a bold and rebellious act. In theory, you might wash your shift weekly, but in practice, most Tudors change when the smell becomes a conversation piece, or when their mother, neighbour, priest drops a pointed hint. Twice a month is ambitious, on the high end of Tudor luxury and, frankly, a little suspicious. No one likes a show-off. Some people claim to air their shifts in the window, but everyone knows that's just for the neighbours to see how many holes you've sewn up. The real challenge is washing. Linen is hard-wearing, but after a month pressed between your skin and your muddy woolen outer layer, it's seen things that would make a modern laundry detergent commercial weep. Scrubbing with lye soap, pounding on rocks, or boiling in a cauldron over a smoky fire are all options. But every wash takes its toll. After a few years, your shift is a ghost of its former self, patches on patches, faded to a colour that can only be described as historic beige. For those without a shift, outer clothes simply pull double duty. Your woolen tunic or dress is worn over bare skin, which sounds romantic until you realise that wool plus sweat equals misery, and the only barrier between you and chafing is the sheer force of will. In winter, you might layer on a second shirt, also unwashed, and congratulate yourself on your advanced personal hygiene. In summer, everything is sticky and uncomfortable, and the hope is that everyone else is too hot and bothered to notice. The upper classes, of course, take things to another level. Rich Tudors may have multiple linen shifts, some with actual lace or embroidery, changed with suspicious frequency and carefully laundered by servants. But even they draw the line somewhere. After all, what's the point of all that wealth if not to occasionally flaunt your disregard for sweat stains? For some, a clean shift is a status symbol. Look at me, I'm so clean my neighbours gossip about it. While for others, it's simply a necessity if you want to survive a summer wedding without melting. There's always an element of improvisation. Torn shift? Patch it with last year's petticoat. No clean underwear? Flip it inside out and hope for the best. Kids outgrow theirs? Pass it down, patch it again, or repurpose it into a dish rag. Waste not, want not, especially when everything is expensive and laundry is a day-long marathon. At the end of the day, you climb into bed in your well-worn, slightly fragrant linen shift and take comfort in the fact that everyone else is equally unwashed. The fabric may itch, the seams may chafe, and the occasional bug may join you for the night, but this is as good as Tudor comfort gets. Underwear, not glamorous, rarely clean, and the unsung hero in the age-old war against medieval misery. Washing clothes involves hauling buckets, scrubbing over boards, and risking frostbite in winter. The average Tudor family just hopes their shirts dry before the mildew takes over. Laundry day in Tudor England is less a cheerful household chore and more a public spectacle, part athletic competition, part community event. and part open-air therapy session for people who have just realized how much clothing can actually weigh when it's wet. Forget about piles of fresh towels and the scent of fabric softener. Here, the laundry process is a full-body workout that starts at sunrise and ends whenever you collapse or run out of daylight, whichever comes first. First, there's the water. Unless you're blessed with a stream right outside your door, the day begins with a back-breaking procession to the village, buckets in hand. Every drop must be hauled, which means even the decision to wash your favorite shirt becomes a weighty matter. Literally. You quickly learn that spot cleaning with spit or a handful of straw is often a more attractive option, but eventually duty calls. Once you've acquired enough water, and arms that ache like you've just won an arm wrestling contest with a cow, it's time to set up. There's no wash house or laundry room, just an open spot in the yard, or perhaps a communal area by the river if you're lucky enough to avoid the geese, gossips, and whatever the local children are throwing in the water this week. Clothes are dumped into big wooden tubs, or even a cauldron, and the real fun begins: scrubbing. Soap, if you can afford it, is a crumbly brick of lye and animal fat, better suited for scouring pots than delicate linen. If you're thrifty, you make do with ashes, sand, or nothing at all. The board you scrub on is rough, and by the end of the morning, so are your knuckles. Stains are attacked with a kind of fury that would impress any modern stain remover. Commercial, blood, mud, and ancient stew all get equal attention. Rinsing means wringing and dunking, again and again, until your arms are as limp as the shirts you're beating senseless. Of course, all this has to be done outdoors, no matter the season. In summer, you fight off flies and sunburn, your brow dripping as much as your shirts. In winter, laundry day becomes an act of pure masochism. You break the ice on the bucket, numb your hands in freezing water, and hang your clothes on the line while your breath makes little clouds and your fingers lose all feeling. At this point, you wonder if wearing dirty clothes would really be so bad after all. Drying is another adventure. There are no dryers, just a rope strung between two trees or the back fence, and a hope that the sun cooperates. If it rains, your half-dried shirts soak up more water than before, and the cycle begins anew. In damp weather, you resign yourself to a wardrobe that's equal parts linen and mildew. There's a distinct Tudor aroma that clings to everyone, a blend of smoke, sweat, and whatever the air brings that day. And the work isn't done yet. Once dry, clothes are checked for repairs. Seams are restitched, holes patched with whatever fabric is at hand. Nothing is wasted. An old shift may be reborn as a handkerchief, a torn sleeve turned into a polishing rag. If you're wealthy, a servant does all this while you complain about how long it takes. If you're not, you do it yourself, cursing every ancestor who decided linen was fashionable. Still, laundry day is a social occasion, filled with gossip, laughter, and the occasional argument over who's hogging the washing board. By the end of it all, you're exhausted, your hands raw, your clothes slightly cleaner than before, and your spirits lifted, at least until you remember you'll have to do it all again in another fortnight. In Tudor England, laundry is more than a chore. It's a testament to stubbornness and community, a small victory over dirt, and a reminder that sometimes the cleanest thing about you is your sense of humour. You spend part of every day picking through your hair and seams for lice, fleas, or the occasional bedbug. Flea combs are common, and there's even a polite way to squash bugs mid-conversation. Just don't get caught flicking them into someone's soup. In Tudor England, personal hygiene isn't just a matter of washing and scrubbing. It's an ongoing battle against a small, resilient army of parasites determined to make your life a living itch. Every Tudor has a close, often too close relationship with the insect population that calls their scalp, sleeves, and bedsheets home. Forget about cats or dogs as household companions. Your real pets are six-legged and don't even pretend to be house-trained. Let's start with lice, the undisputed kings of Tudor cohabitation. Lice are so common that they're barely even considered embarrassing. Everyone has them. from the lowliest street urchin to the most elaborately powdered noble. In fact, the only real scandal is acting like you don't. Children are practically born with a full set, and adults treat them with the same resigned acceptance they give to rainy days and taxes. If you're rich, you might have a servant tasked with nitpicking every morning, a ritual of grooming, gossip, and occasionally judgment. If you're poor, the job falls to a friend or family member and becomes a group bonding experience, because nothing says family like handing your mother a squirming louse and asking for her approval. Flea combs are prized possessions, carefully carved from wood or bone and passed down like family heirlooms. You run one through your hair or the lining of your clothes, hoping for the satisfying snap of a well-caught intruder. There's a special etiquette to flea hunting. A quick inspection during conversation is fine, but always look away before the final execution. If you're subtle, you can crush a louse between your thumbnails with barely a pause in your story. If you're not, expect disapproving looks, especially if you flick the evidence into the nearest stew pot or bread basket. Bedbugs are the silent partners in this infestation drama. They lurk in the straw of your mattress, emerging only at night to leave you with itchy welts and a sense of existential dread. Changing your sheets rarely solves the problem, since the bugs are as stubborn as a Tudor toddler and twice as sneaky. Some people try hanging their bedding outside to air out the problem, but all that really does is give the bedbugs a change of scenery. The next night, they're back, possibly with friends. The noble solution to insect misery is often more about distraction than elimination. You might powder your hair with fragrant herbs or stuff lavender and pennyroyal into your pillows, hoping to at least make your parasites smell nicer. Certain types of clothing, like tight linen sleeves and high collars, are said to make it harder for bugs to move around, but all that really does is create a fun obstacle course for particularly motivated fleas. Perfumed oils can help, but only until the oil runs out or you attract something even worse. In particularly bad years, outbreaks of itching and rash sweep through whole neighborhoods. Remedies are traded like precious currency: vinegar rinses, sulfur ointments, and wild tales about secret herbal cures. Of course, nothing really works except patience and an ability to keep a straight face when your neighbor starts vigorously scratching at the market. For all their misery, lice and fleas are also social levelers. They ignore wealth, status, and even cleanliness. Henry VIII had lice. Queen Elizabeth herself was famously fond of her flea combs. If the monarchs can't beat them, neither can you. So you scratch, you search, you share a laugh, and you accept that some of your oldest friends are also your itchiest. At the end of the day, you fall asleep to the gentle rustle of something skittering through your hair, comforted by the thought that at least tonight's pests are old acquaintances. It's a small price to pay for being a true Tudor, itchy, resilient, and only mildly horrified. Communal baths are fun until someone accuses the bathhouse of being a den of vice. The church, ever vigilant, periodically shuts them down, because nothing says moral health like a city full of the unwashed faithful. It all starts innocently enough. You, your neighbours, and half the town stripped down and shoulder to shoulder, scrubbing away the daily grime in a tub big enough to double as a fishing pond. For a moment, there's the steamy comfort of warm water, friendly chatter, and the shared goal of getting at least one layer cleaner before supper. Everyone is relaxed, soaking, and, dare we say, almost happy. You leave the bathhouse feeling refreshed, lighter, and maybe even a little smug until you realise someone's been watching. Enter the church. For Tudor clergy, bathhouses are both a spiritual minefield and an irresistible source of gossip. The official line is that too much public bathing leads to moral decay, which, for the record, is not a kind of mildew. There are too many people in too few clothes, too much laughter echoing from behind thin walls, and, occasionally, too much business happening after dark that has nothing to do with soap. Rumours travel faster than fleas. The baker's apprentice was seen leaving after midnight. The candlemaker's wife brought her friend from out of town. Before you know it, the parish priest is issuing fire and brimstone warnings from the pulpit. The baths, he thunders, are a hotbed of temptation and sin, and only the devil himself could enjoy so much naked company. Next week, the doors are barred, the fires go out, and a handwritten notice appears, closed by order of the church. Please reconsider your life choices. The town's moral guardians are not easily ignored. Tudor society is deeply religious. You cross the church at your peril, especially when it comes to issues of public modesty. The idea that anything involving warm water, nudity, and relaxation could possibly be virtuous is, frankly, suspicious. If you're especially unlucky, local authorities will make an example of a bathhouse owner, fining or even imprisoning them for encouraging vice. There are stories whispered, of course, about people being excommunicated over an overly enthusiastic scrub. Of course, not everyone agrees. Many Tudors consider the baths not just a luxury but a necessity. With most homes lacking even the rudiments of private washing, the public bathhouse is the only option for the majority of the town. When the baths close, people get inventive, turning to riverbanks, barrels, or a quick rain shower to keep the worst of the dirt at bay. But nothing really replaces the warmth and camaraderie of a true communal soak. When the ban is enforced for too long, the city's collective aroma becomes less a problem and more a form of public protest. Every so often, the baths reopen under new management or with stricter rules, separate hours for men and women, mandatory clothing which never stays on, or extra supervision from a humorless churchwarden whose job is to glare disapprovingly at anyone who looks too relaxed. But the cycle repeats. Bathhouses, it turns out, are hard to kill because people will always choose a good soak over eternal stickiness. The result? A tug-of-war between clean bodies and pure souls, with everyday Tudors caught in the middle, clutching their washcloths and trying to look innocent. The clergy get their headlines, the bathhouses get their customers back, eventually, and everyone gets a fresh batch of rumours to stew in. So next time you take a steamy shower without fear of spiritual condemnation, remember your Tudor ancestors, brave, resourceful, and always ready to dodge a little moral panic for the promise of warm water. Because in the end, a clean conscience and a clean behind are equally important, but only one keeps you from itching in church. Courtly folk might bathe more often, maybe even once a month, if they're wild. The king's bath is a giant wooden tub filled with scented water, surrounded by servants who exist solely to keep the soap from running away. Welcome to hygiene at the top, a world where bathing is less a daily routine and more a lavish performance. If you're a Tudor noble, you enjoy privileges that the commoners only dream about: privacy, fresh linens, and, most enviably, warm water that wasn't fetched by your own aching arms. But bathing, even here, is a spectacle, a statement, and, depending on who's watching, a subtle form of political theatre. Let's start with the bath itself. The king, for example, doesn't just hop into any old tub. His bath is more furniture than fixture. A large, barrel-shaped contraption lined with linen, filled with water heated by a roaring fire and scented with rose petals, herbs, or whatever else is fashionable this month. Before Henry VIII plops his royal posterior down, a team of servants ensures the temperature is just right, and the soap, hard, white, imported, and worth its weight in silver, is standing by on a silver tray. You, as a lesser noble, might get something similar, though probably without the silverware. Your bath day is a carefully choreographed event. Servants dash in and out with steaming buckets, pouring the water into a portable tub in your chamber. Your best linen towels are set out, washed, sun-dried, and still carrying a faint whiff of the manor's smoke. If you're especially fashionable, you finish your ablutions with a dab of scented oil, a luxury product imported all the way from somewhere impressive sounding. But here's the catch. Even for the upper classes, bathing isn't as regular as you might expect. The medical advice of the day still warns against frequent washing, fearing it might open your pores to disease or drain your vital humours. A monthly bath is ambitious. Some nobles might stretch it to a seasonal affair, with more frequent face and hand washing to keep up appearances. After all, What's the point of embroidered cuffs if you're not going to show them off at dinner? And let's talk about those who make this all possible. The battalion of servants. Bathing a Tudor noble is a team sport. Some fetch and heat water, others carry the heavy tub, and a select few are trusted to help with the actual scrubbing, dabbing, and powdering. There are servants to hold up privacy screens, servants to guard the door, and yes, a servant whose only job is to make sure the soap doesn't wander off, either into someone's pocket or down the drain. If you've ever dreamed of being pampered at a luxury spa, just add a dozen nosy bystanders and a courtier or two and you're almost there. Bathing is more than just personal care. It's also a chance to show off. Noble women might emerge from their baths with their hair arranged just so, skin powdered with rare cosmetics, and dresses chosen to highlight their recently scrubbed complexions. Bathing, like everything else at court, is a display of wealth, status, and political savvy. Gossip swirls around those who bathe too much, suspicious or too little, scandalous, and more than one courtly intrigue has begun or ended over the question of who used whose bathwater. The bath itself is only part of the story. Afterward, nobles dress in their freshest linens, sometimes several layers thick to keep the world at bay. Powdered wigs, perfumed gloves, and embroidered slippers complete the look. The goal is to appear as though you've just been airlifted out of a painting, untouched by sweat, dust, or unpleasant reality. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, the servants grumble about the endless laundry, the spilled water, and the lingering aroma of lavender and ambition. Of course, the greatest luxury isn't just cleanliness, but the freedom to get dirty again, on purpose. Whether it's a muddy hunt or a rowdy feast, the true mark of a Tudor aristocrat is knowing you can always call for another bath, another towel, and another round of servants to make the mess disappear. So, while the peasants scratch, scrub, and soak as best they can, the nobles live in a world of perfumed baths and political hygiene. Cleaner, perhaps, but never less complicated. In the end, whether you're a king or a commoner, you're only ever a day away from your next great adventure in Tudor dirt. Deodorant is a mix of ground herbs, flower petals, and hopeful thinking. You stuff sage and lavender in your clothes, but by lunchtime you're back to smelling like a marathon in a barn. In Tudor England, body odor isn't so much a personal failing as it is a way of life. The entire population is locked in a never-ending struggle to smell less like themselves and more like a field of wildflowers, at least until the sun hits high noon and the collective illusion collapses. You start the day with hope, a linen shift, and a carefully chosen bouquet of herbal remedies tucked anywhere you think might do some good. Armpits, collars, shoes, even hats. Nothing is safe from the sweet invasion. But the science of Tudor deodorant is more alchemy than certainty. The most common solution is to rub or sprinkle ground herbs like sage, rosemary, and lavender into your clothing, and if you're feeling particularly committed, directly onto your skin. Apothecaries sell little sachets of dried petals and spices meant to be worn around the neck or pinned into sleeves. The richer your scent, the more refined your status, at least until you get close enough for reality to set in. Flower petals are the perfume of the people, crushed and pressed into the seams of tunics and gowns. On feast days, you might even see a noblewoman tossing handfuls of rose petals into her bathwater, or tucking marigolds behind her ears, for that just frolicked through a garden effect. Men, on the other hand, might dab their wrists with rosemary oil or stuff their doublets with mint, hoping the fresh aroma outlasts the stench of last night's stew. For the truly desperate, or the fashionably forward, citrus peels become all the rage. Oranges and lemons, rare and expensive as they are prized more for their ability to mask sweat than their nutritional value. Rubbing a bit of peel under your arms or over your hands signals to the world that you're both trendy and wealthy enough to waste fruit on your armpits. Then there's the experimental approach. Alum crystals, vinegar rubs, and even salt scrubs. Alum, a natural mineral, is ground and dabbed beneath arms as an early form of antiperspirant. It doesn't work especially well, but it gives you an excuse to stand with your arms outstretched in public, fanning your pits and hoping for a miracle. Vinegar is sometimes applied as a kind of astringent, burning away both odor and optimism. As for salt, well, it just stings, but that doesn't stop people from trying it at least once. All of this is supported by a booming business in pomanders, decorative balls of scented wax or resin that dangle from belts or chains. The real function of a pomander is to provide a portable cloud of hope, allowing you to occasionally inhale something pleasant as you navigate the aromatic battleground of the Tudor streets. The richer the household, the bigger and gaudier the pomander, as if sheer determination could defeat biology. Of course, these solutions are only temporary. By midday, the fresh scent of herbs has faded, drowned out by the relentless tide of sweat, smoke, and animal byproducts that make up daily Tudor life. At court, the situation is no better. Even in the grandest halls, the collective aroma quickly becomes overpowering, a unique blend of perfume, ambition, and a hint of panic. Private moments are few, and close encounters are best conducted at arm's length. There's also an element of social strategy. If you can't hide your own odor, the next best thing is to surround yourself with people who smell even worse. That way, by comparison, you come off smelling like roses, or at least like last year's potpourri. Gossip columns of the time, if they'd had them, would be filled with rankings not of fashion, but of the most tolerable smelling members of court. And so, day after day, the cycle continues. You start fresh, end ripe, and in between, you wage a fragrant but ultimately futile war against the realities of human biology. Still, there's something comforting about it all. At the end of the day, everyone's in the same boat, or, more accurately, the same slightly musty herb-stuffed doublet. You may not win the battle against your own armpits, but in Tudor England, showing up and trying is half the victory. Your hair is either long, greasy, or gone. Head coverings help, and for the stylish, wigs become all the rage, especially when your own hair succumbs to lice or the odd scalp fungus. In Tudor England, a good hair day is the stuff of legend. For most people, hair care is less about vanity and more about basic survival, warding off lice, hiding bald patches, and, if you're especially paranoid, keeping away evil spirits and airborne plagues. Your daily hair routine starts with an honest assessment. Is your hair manageable today, or is it simply time to cover it up and pretend it's not there? For the average Tudor, hair is worn long and as nature intended, meaning tangled, unwashed, and home to more than one type of bug. Shampoo doesn't exist, and washing with regular soap is as pleasant as dunking your head in lye, because, unfortunately, that's basically what you're doing. Soap is harsh, made from animal fat and caustic lye, and while it might strip away some of the grease, it also removes the will to continue. After a wash, your hair feels squeaky, brittle, and slightly endangered. If you're clever, or just desperate, you might experiment with various home remedies. Vinegar rinses, eggs, and even a splash of ale are touted as ways to bring out your hair's natural shine, although the actual result is usually more barnyard chic than glossy locks. Some households will brush their hair with a boar bristle brush, which works if you're lucky enough to own one and don't mind sharing with every other member of the family, pets included. Head coverings, meanwhile, are less a fashion statement and more a form of damage control. For men, the cap or hat is a crucial defense against sun, rain, and the disapproving glares of strangers when your scalp is looking patchier than the family garden. Women wear linen coiffes, kerchiefs, or elaborate hoods, sometimes decorated with embroidery if they want to look both respectable and distract from what's underneath. Covering your hair is also a handy way to claim you're protecting your modesty while secretly just hiding a week's worth of oil and the occasional suspicious rash. But the real innovation of the age? The wig. By the mid-1500s, wigs, called periwigs, begin to make their mark among the wealthy and the fashionable. At first, wigs are a solution for hair loss, lice, and social embarrassment. Then, like all things Tudor, they become a symbol of status. The bigger, curlier, and whiter your wig, the more important you are, or at least the more you want people to think you are. It's the perfect answer to hair you can't control. Just hide it under something twice as elaborate. Of course, wigs have their own hygiene issues. Made from human hair, horsehair, or even goat, they're seldom washed and often stuffed with scented powders or herbs in a futile attempt to mask their underlying aroma of livestock. Fleas and lice simply see wigs as a portable buffet. If you spot a noble furiously scratching at their head during a royal banquet, now you know why. For those who truly fear disease, there's an added bonus. Many believe that covering your head, be it with a hat, hood, or wig, can actually protect you from the plague. Bad air is the enemy, and a barrier between your scalp and the rest of the world is seen as plague insurance. It doesn't actually work, but it's as good a reason as any to keep the hood up and the questions down. Hair dye, if you're feeling adventurous, involves a cocktail of herbs, metal salts, and whatever else is lying around. Want to look older? Powder your hair white with flour. Want to look younger? Rub in a little walnut juice and pray for the best. If you wake up with an alarming orange streak, just call it fashion and set the trend. By the end of the day, your scalp itches, your hair smells vaguely of smoke, and you've convinced yourself that wearing your hat to bed is completely normal. But that's Tudor hair care for you. A world where manageable means hidden, clean means less sticky, and the biggest beauty secret is simply keeping your wig out of the soup. Tomorrow you'll try again, armed with a brush, a prayer, and a sprig of rosemary for luck. Because in Tudor England, your hair is as much a battlefield as your teeth, and you're just hoping to emerge with most of it intact. A daily shave? Only if you're a barber surgeon with a steady hand and a high pain tolerance. Razors are sharp, but also mysterious, and a nick can mean weeks of stinging regret. In Tudor England, personal grooming is a test of bravery, creativity, and, sometimes, sheer luck. Modern razors with safety blades are a distant dream. The everyday tools of the trade are straight razors and knives, occasionally sharp, always intimidating, and often a family heirloom passed down through generations of trembling hands. The bravest souls, or the most fashion-conscious, might attempt a shave once or twice a week, though many men simply decide that robust facial hair is the look of the century. The experience starts with heating water, if you can spare it, and hoping there's enough soap left to raise even a reluctant lather. Soap, remember, is a rare commodity, often more suited to washing wool than human skin. If you're fancy, you might have a shaving brush. If not, a handful of wet grass or a bit of linen does the trick. There's a nervous moment as you stare down your reflection, usually a blur in a battered piece of polished metal, reminding yourself that barbers double as surgeons for a reason. Most men, if they can afford it, leave shaving to the professionals. The local barber surgeon is a one-stop shop for haircuts, beard trims, bloodletting, and tooth extraction. He travels with an impressive kit: sharp razors, shears, cups, bandages, and the kind of confidence that comes from only occasionally causing permanent injury. Sitting in the barber's chair, you put your faith in his steady hand and his ability to avoid the many, many things that could go wrong. A slip could mean a nasty cut, an infection, or a scar that becomes your new party trick. For the DIY crowd, shaving at home is an exercise in caution and improvisation. Some Tudors use animal fat to soften the beard. Others rub in ash or sand to exfoliate before attacking the bristles with a razor that's been honed on a leather strap and, if you're lucky, not used to gut a fish the day before. You proceed slowly, holding your breath with every stroke, pausing at every unfamiliar sensation to double-check for blood. Even the best shavers finish the job with at least one minor nick, which they patch up with a strip of linen and, if necessary, a swig of ale. And it's not just the men. Noble women, especially, pluck their eyebrows into high, surprised arches and sometimes remove hairlines to achieve the coveted high forehead look of the age. This involves yanking out hair with tweezers, thread, or, in a pinch, a friend's nimble fingers. The pain is legendary, but beauty is suffering, and fashion waits for no one. Haircuts are another risky affair. Barbers are busy. So many Tudors take matters and shears into their own hands or leave the job to a family member who swears they know what they're doing. Results range from slightly uneven to local jester, but no one has time to worry about a bad hair day when you're living in a drafty cottage with livestock. Beards and mustaches are symbols of wisdom, virility, or just not wanting to risk another round with the razor. Styles change with the monarch, and courtly gentlemen may find themselves growing or shaving beards to match royal trends. A patchy beard is excused by tales of heroic battle or an unfortunate run-in with the razor, and no one blames you for wearing a scarf a little higher to cover the evidence. Grooming, of course, extends beyond the face. Nose hairs, ear hairs, and anything else that sprouts up unexpectedly is fair game for trimming, usually with the same razor used on your face, your sheep, and occasionally your boots. Accidents are common, sympathy is rare. At the end of the ordeal, you step back, blotting your skin and bracing yourself for the inevitable sting of salt, air, and regret. If you've survived the morning with most of your skin intact, you consider it a personal triumph. If not, you chalk it up to experience and make a mental note to visit the barber surgeon for a second opinion. In the end, Tudor shaving is about perseverance, resilience, and the eternal hope that tomorrow's face will be just a little less hazardous to maintain. If nothing else, at least you have a good story, and maybe a stylish new scar to go with it. White lead face paint is the trend among the wealthy, offering a look somewhere between ghostly elegance and suffering from something contagious. Blush is made of crushed flowers, and if your teeth are blackened, that just means you can afford sugar. In Tudor England, beauty is less about accentuating what you have and more about audaciously covering up what you're stuck with. The beauty routine of the era is equal parts theatre, chemistry experiment, and an ongoing negotiation with your own mortality. If you're rich enough to dabble in cosmetics, you're rich enough not to worry about the long-term side effects. And if you're not, you just pray the candlelight is flattering and avoid smiling too wide. Let's start with the iconic look. A face so pale it could startle the dead. The reason? The most fashionable Tudors are obsessed with paleness as a marker of class. After all, only peasants labour in the sun. For the upwardly mobile, a pasty complexion is the ultimate status symbol. The best way to get it? Slather your skin with Venetian ceruse, a luxurious but highly toxic mixture of white lead and vinegar. The result is a smooth, white mask that gleams under the flicker of candlelight and doubles as a handy excuse for every strange rash or headache you develop. Beauty is pain, but it's also mildly poisonous. If you're not ready to commit to a full mask of deathly pallor, a little strategic powdering will do. Ground eggshells, rice, and even chalk are pressed into service. For those with a more natural look in mind, the application of flour can add just the right hint of corpse. All of this is carefully layered over whatever skin you've managed to keep from flaking off after your last lye-based deep cleanse. Blush, of course, is essential. Otherwise, people might mistake you for an actual ghost and not just a highly eligible noble. Tudor blush is homemade, from crushed rose petals, red ochre, or even a dab of beetroot if you're feeling particularly adventurous. The key is not to overdo it. A gentle flush is enough to signal that you're both healthy and on the cutting edge of courtly fashion. But too much, and you risk looking like you've been surprised by the privy seat in the middle of the night. Lips and eyebrows receive their share of attention too. Some fashionable women pluck their brows into thin, high arches, while others paint them dark with lampblack or soot. Lips are tinted with cochineal, if you can afford it, or a careful smear of berries for the rest. As for your teeth, black is the new white, at least among the sugar-wealthy elite. Rotting teeth aren't just a dental disaster. They're proof that you can afford imported sweets and are, therefore, a person of means. A smile that reveals a row of darkened, decaying teeth is considered just as impressive as any jewel or gown. Hair gets the full Tudor treatment as well. Fashionable shades shift from golden to chestnut to jet black, depending on who's on the throne. Dyeing your hair involves everything from walnut shells to lye, saffron, or even pigeon dung. And while the effect is rarely subtle, it's always memorable. Wigs are powdered to match, dusted with starch or flour and scented with lavender to distract from any underlying issues. Men aren't left out of the beauty arms race either. Beards are shaped, waxed, and occasionally tinted. Faces may be discreetly powdered to even out a complexion battered by wind and cheap soap. The best-dressed gentlemen dab their wrists and necks with scented waters and do their best to appear as effortless as possible, even when their sleeves are full of rose petals and they're risking arsenic poisoning for a whiter brow. But even in the courtly world of beauty, nothing ever quite covers up the realities of Tudor hygiene. The lead paint cracks, the berry stains smudge, and the wigs itch. At the end of the day, every elegant lady and dashing lord must return home, scrub off the evidence, and start all over again tomorrow. Beneath the layers, everyone's just hoping the look holds up long enough for a good marriage proposal, a royal audience, or at least a candlelit supper where nobody sits too close. So, the next time you're struggling with a stubborn pimple or an uneven foundation, spare a thought for the Tudors, masters of painting over the problem, one hazardous layer at a time. If you're fancy, you might rinse with wine. If you're practical, you stick to vinegar. Both options are slightly better than the water, which is busy moonlighting as a disease delivery service. Welcome to the wild and mouth-puckering world of Tudor oral hygiene, where morning breath is not so much a social issue as a communal rite of passage. Before toothpaste, before Listerine, and definitely before minty fresh anything, there was only the desperate search for something, anything that could take the edge off a mouthful of last night's onions, beer, and regret. For the upper crust, the solution is, as always, to throw money at the problem. Wine isn't just for feasts or impressing the neighbours, it's a legitimate dental accessory. A hearty swish of red or white, sometimes mixed with herbs or spices, is thought to clean the teeth and freshen the breath. You might even see nobles at court swirling wine between their teeth before spitting it elegantly into the nearest potted plant. Some go a step further and swish with honeyed wine, which at least makes your morning breath smell like a festival, even if it does nothing to slow down the slow march of tooth decay. For the rest of the population, vinegar is the tool of choice. Sharp, sour, and capable of stripping the flavour from anything, a mouthful of vinegar wakes you up better than a bucket of cold water to the face. Some add salt or herbs, swirling the bracing mixture around the teeth and gums with eyes watering before spitting it into the nearest gutter. You tell yourself the stinging sensation is proof it's working. After all, if your gums are burning, the germs must be dying, right? Or at least considering a strategic retreat. Actual water, of course, is only for the truly brave or the hopelessly optimistic. Tudor water supplies are famous for their creativity, flavoured with hints of livestock, runoff, and whatever the upstream neighbours were disposing of last night. Rinsing your mouth with Thames water is an experience not soon forgotten, usually resulting in a new appreciation for strong spirits and a sudden spike in religious activity as you pray for survival. But the world of mouthwash doesn't end with wine and vinegar. Enter the home remedies: sage, rosemary, and mint boiled into infusions, gargled with hope and possibly a pinch of superstition. Some households swear by a rinse made from brine, claiming it not only freshens the breath but also fortifies the teeth against worms. Whether or not this is true, it at least provides an excuse to avoid close conversation for a while. Then there are the truly creative approaches. In some circles, chewing fennel seeds or parsley is recommended, both to mask odours and to clean the teeth. If you're particularly daring, you might crush charcoal and rub it directly onto your teeth, primitive whitening, Tudor style. The downside? Your smile now resembles a chimney sweep's on a bad day, but your breath is at least less onion-forward. Of course, for most Tudors, dental hygiene is less about preventative care and more about managing the fallout. A persistent toothache is met with a rinse of brandy or strong ale, anything to numb the pain and dull the senses. Some might even chew on cloves, both for the flavour and the mild numbing effect. If all else fails, there's always the barber surgeon, who will be happy to remove the offending tooth with a tool that looks suspiciously like something used on horses. All in all, the goal isn't fresh breath, so much as breath that won't get you immediately banished from the dinner table. You do your best. You experiment with what's available, and you cultivate the Tudor art of breathing with your mouth politely closed during conversation. By the end of the day, you're left with a mouth that tingles, a vague sense of accomplishment, and the certain knowledge that at least you tried. Mouthwash, Tudor edition, may not guarantee a dazzling smile, but it will give you a few moments of hope until supper, at least. Getting dirty is inevitable. In fact, some believe that a nice layer of grime actually protects against illness. The cleaner you are, the sicker you get. Medieval logic, brought to you by the same people who thought tomatoes were suspicious. Welcome to the Tudor philosophy of, if you can't beat the dirt, join it. Cleanliness may be next to godliness in the pulpit, but in the alleyways and fields of 16th century England, dirt is less a problem and more of a practical solution. People wear their filth like a badge of honor, or at the very least, as a necessary layer of everyday armor. After all, there's nothing like a crust of honest mud to keep out the cold, the pests, and the neighbors with questions about your last bath. You start your day already a shade less than clean, thanks to the general ambience of your home, your straw mattress, and the company of livestock who treat doorways as more of a suggestion than a barrier. Clothes are rarely changed, except in emergencies, and shoes are just as likely to track manure as protect against it. By breakfast, you've already lost the battle against dust, and by lunch you've accepted that your fingernails are now their own ecosystem. But the real trick is learning to embrace the filth. Many Tudors genuinely believe that dirt forms a protective barrier, an ancient form of SPF, mosquito repellent, and antibacterial soap all rolled into one. Bathing too often, they warn, opens the pores and lets the bad air in, so unless you want to catch a cold or worse, bring down a bout of plague, you'd better keep a healthy patina going at all times. Children especially are encouraged to stay grubby, not out of neglect, but out of a kind of medieval logic that says dirty kids are healthy kids. And honestly, with the water quality, who can blame them? For those who work the land, getting muddy is simply part of the job description. Farmhands, labourers, and anyone who spends time outdoors know that the earth stains everything it touches, from boots to bonnets. If you're lucky, the mud dries before it flakes off. If you're not, you spend the day squelching and inventing new curses for the weather. Market days in the city are a parade of mud-spattered skirts and breeches, each spot a reminder of a hard day's work and a lack of concern for decorative washing. In town, the situation isn't much better. The streets are a mix of garbage, waste, and anything else the local population decides to throw out the window. You sidestep puddles with the grace of a dancer and hope your feet come out more or less the same colour as when you started. Servants and apprentices do what they can, but the priority is keeping the main living area presentable. The rest can be handled by nature. Fashion, too, finds a way to work with the mess. Dark colours and sturdy fabrics are all the rage, not because they're stylish, but because they hide the worst of the day's disasters. Black, brown, and russet are practical choices for disguising stains. If you're especially cunning, you might add a pattern or an extra layer just to draw the eye away from the more obvious spots. And if someone does comment on your appearance, there's always the old standby. It's the mark of an honest day's work. Every so often, you make a token effort to clean up, usually before church, a holiday, or an important guest's visit. But even then, you're not aiming for spotless, just less noticeably grimy. A quick splash, a dusting of flour, and maybe a sprig of rosemary tucked somewhere visible, and you're ready to face the world once more. At the end of the day, the dirt you pick up is more than just a nuisance. It's a record of where you've been and what you've survived. There's a certain camaraderie among the dirty, an understanding that life is hard and soap is expensive. The real sign of status isn't how clean you are, but how well you wear your filth. So the next time you fret over a grass stain or muddy shoes, take heart. You'd have been right at home in Tudor England, where dirt isn't just tolerated, it's considered good for you. Now that's what we call vintage self-care. You slide into shoes made of untreated leather or just go barefoot. Either way, your feet are a medieval disaster zone, cracked, itchy, and occasionally sporting bonus mushrooms. Welcome to Tudor podiatry, where the only guarantee is that your feet will suffer heroically for your daily bread. Foot hygiene is a concept so foreign that even the fanciest noble has probably spent a few afternoons wincing across a floor covered in hay, cold mud, or some mysterious sticky substance you'd rather not investigate. Most days, you start with optimism, 10 toes, a strong stride, and maybe a hope for socks. Most days, you end by muttering curses and reconsidering every life choice that led you to a world without foot powder. Let's start with the shoes. Tudor footwear comes in two main flavors. May as well be barefoot and slightly less painful than stepping on a rake. The average pair is made from untreated leather, stiff and unforgiving when new, shapeless and sagging when old. Soles are thin and rarely attached with any kind of finesse, so you feel every cobblestone, every pebble, every single betrayal of the road beneath you. Forget about left and right. They're all just shoes. If you're lucky, you get two that are sort of the same size. If not, you rotate which foot gets the larger one and try not to trip. Now, socks, if you have them, are precious. Hand-knitted, lumpy, and almost always damp. They're prized mostly as a thin defense against the chafing of rough shoes or, worse, the chill of bare ground. In summer, your feet are a stew of sweat and dirt. In winter, they're so cold you start to wonder if toes are truly necessary. Most people just go barefoot around the house or field, braving splinters, chicken droppings, and, inevitably, the friendly local fungus. Warts and blisters are simply part of growing up. By midday, your feet have usually picked up half the world. Mud cakes between your toes, little stones wedge themselves under the arch, and sharp sticks become sudden, painful lessons in humility. Open shoes, if you can call them that, invite every passing bug, thorn, and icy puddle to join the party. The result? Cracked heels, endless itching, and a special kind of foot scent that can clear a room faster than a chamber pot mishap. Let's talk about fungal issues. Athlete's foot, ringworm, and other delightful medieval infections are as common as dandelions. With baths rare and shoes often swapped between family members, it's only a matter of time before your toes become the hotbed of a thriving microkingdom. Herbal ointments made from garlic, onions, or whatever else is growing nearby are applied more out of desperation than hope. If you're lucky, the itch fades. If not, you just learn to walk with a stylish limp. And then there's shoe rot, the slow but inevitable disintegration of your prized footwear. With all that moisture, mud, and lack of proper care, leather quickly breaks down, leaving you with holes big enough for a mouse to move in. Nobles might splurge on new shoes, but for everyone else, repairs are done with whatever's handy. String, extra bits of hide, or, for the truly desperate, the medieval equivalent of duct tape, twisted grass, or strips of linen. Of course, none of this stops you from living your life. You tend the fields, walk to market, dance at the fair, and flee from angry geese, all on feet that would make a modern podiatrist faint. When the pain gets too much, you soak your feet in cold water, if you have time, or smear on a salve, then grit your teeth and soldier on. Beauty isn't the point, survival is. At night, you peel off your shoes, inspect the damage, and maybe share a rueful laugh with family members comparing blisters and calluses. The good news? No one expects pretty feet in Tudor England, just feet that work, more or less. So, you say a quiet thank you to your toes, wiggle them hopefully, and get ready to do it all again tomorrow. In Tudor life, your feet carry you through it all, noble or not, cracked, muddy, and occasionally mushroomed, but always moving forward. Most chores, including laundry, are postponed until the clothes become self-aware. If your neighbours are also dirty, you barely notice. That's the real Tudor community spirit. In Tudor England, there's no shame in letting chores pile up, because frankly, what's the rush? If you spent every day cleaning, washing, and tidying, you'd never have time for anything fun, like listening to the town gossip or running from geese. Besides, when everyone smells like last month's onions and this morning's chamber pot, who are you really trying to impress? Cleanliness is not a competitive sport, it's a distant aspiration. Laundry sits at the bottom of the to-do list, right below invent time travel and find a cure for lice. The average Tudor shirt lives a hard life, worn for days, slept in, spilled on, used to wipe hands, and, occasionally, loaned to the neighbour's cousin who forgot theirs at the last May Day festival. You only consider washing it when the fabric begins to stiffen, stand up on its own, or make strange noises when folded. This relaxed approach to chores extends to every corner of the house. The floor is swept when the straw starts to outnumber the furniture. Pots are scrubbed when you can't identify what's stuck to the bottom, or when it starts to move. Bed linens are aired out more often than they're washed, waved in the wind like surrender flags before being brought back in. No cleaner, but at least slightly less pungent. The best part is that nobody judges you. Your neighbours are in the same boat, with their own backlog of shirts, breeches, and mysterious stains. If you do decide to wash a load of clothes, it's an event worthy of commentary. Oh, look at her, getting ahead of herself. What's the occasion? A royal visit? An outbreak of decency? A little teasing is all part of the fun. When the time does come to tackle chores, it's a group effort. Or at least, a group procrastination. Children are sent to fetch water, but get distracted by a frog. Someone's supposed to gather firewood, but they return with wildflowers and stories of a haunted tree. You sit down to mend a torn hem, but the thread is tangled, the needle lost, and suddenly it's supper time. By nightfall, the only thing you've achieved is a new layer of dust and an impressive list of excuses. The philosophy is simple. Why do today what you can possibly convince someone else to do tomorrow? There are always better things to do, like helping with the harvest, going to the market, or simply sitting by the fire, exchanging tales of legendary laziness from generations past. After all, if the house hasn't collapsed and nobody's caught the plague, you must be doing something right. Even festive occasions are approached with the bare minimum of preparation. Before holidays, you might sweep the hearth and chase the chickens out of the pantry. But deep cleaning is reserved for weddings, funerals, and the occasional royal proclamation. The goal is to look busy if the priest or landlord drops by, which mostly involves moving dirt from one place to another in a convincing fashion. This approach has its advantages. Without the constant pressure of sparkling floors and spotless tunics, life is less stressful. You learn to accept a certain baseline level of mess and move on. The shared experience of perpetual almost cleanliness creates a sense of solidarity. Everyone's in on the same joke, and nobody expects perfection. In the end, you find joy in the little victories, a clean shirt at Easter, a freshly swept hearth, or the rare feeling of putting on linen that hasn't yet developed a personality. Chores, after all, are not the point of Tudor life. Survival, laughter, and a well-timed nap are far more important. So next time you eye that pile of laundry and think tomorrow, just remember, you're not lazy, you're keeping a grand tradition alive, and that's real community spirit. When illness strikes, cleanliness is more spiritual than practical. The doctor prescribes prayer, leeches, and a little holy water, preferably not from the river. In Tudor England, sickness is a part of life, lurking in every chilly draught, spoiled pie, and suspicious handshake at the market. The best defense against disease? Hope, mostly, along with a collection of questionable home remedies and the conviction that if you catch something, it's probably the will of God or the result of someone else's dirty laundry. Cleanliness, in the way we think of it today, is a distant second to piety and luck. The sick room itself is not what you'd call sterile. It's usually the same room where you eat, sleep, and occasionally entertain a cow on a cold night. If you're especially lucky, or noble, you might get a straw pallet in a quiet corner, separated from the chaos by a curtain or a helpful relative holding a broom. The air is thick with the scent of tallow candles, musty linen, and whatever the last patient left behind. Sunlight is welcome but rare, and fresh air is invited in only after a heated argument about evil winds and night vapours. When someone falls ill, the entire household mobilizes. Windows are thrown open or nailed shut, depending on the latest theory. Herbal bundles are hung from rafters to cleanse the air, but mostly to mask the other, less poetic smells. The patient is wrapped in every available blanket, partly for warmth and partly to keep the fleas from running away. The doctor's arrival is an event in itself. He comes armed with a large hat, a suspicious mustache, and a kit full of tools that look better suited to fixing a wagon than healing a human. Diagnosis is as much guesswork as science. Humours are checked, pulses are pondered, and sometimes a pigeon is sacrificed for good measure. After careful consideration, the verdict is delivered. A touch of the ague, an imbalance of yellow bile, or perhaps, if things are really dire, an excess of melancholy. The cure? A blend of spiritual and physical interventions. Leeches are the Tudor multi-tool, applied liberally to any part of the body that looks full of bad blood. Prayer is prescribed in equal measure, along with a dash of holy water, bottled at the church, not the Thames, thank you very much. Relics are brought out, saints invoked, and if you're especially desperate, a neighbour's goat might be enlisted for a quick pass over the patient, just to be safe. Actual cleaning is minimal, but what does happen is earnest. The sick room is swept with extra vigour, though mostly to give visitors something to do. Bandages are boiled, hands are washed, with cold water and a lot of sighing. And the patient's linen is changed if there's time, or if a priest is expected. Smells are battled with vinegar, rosemary, and the occasional strategic bonfire. Visitors arrive with advice and dubious remedies. Aunt Marjorie swears by mustard plasters, while old Tom recommends garlic necklaces for all contagious ailments. Someone suggests burning a feather under the patient's nose, another brings a live chicken for luck, and everyone agrees that soup is the answer, even if it contains more bone than broth. At night, the sick room becomes a theatre of hope and resignation. Candles flicker, prayers are whispered, and the patient alternates between shivering and sweating. Sometimes they recover, proving the power of leeches, prayer, or sheer stubbornness. Sometimes they don't, and the household turns to mourning rituals, which involve more cleaning, more holy water, and plenty of time to reflect on the mysterious nature of illness. Throughout it all, cleanliness is never really the focus. The belief persists that outward washing can only do so much, while true healing comes from within, body, soul, and a careful balancing of your humours. As you tuck in for the night, you comfort yourself with the knowledge that, in Tudor England, a little dirt never killed anyone except when it did, and even then, at least your conscience is clean. Tudor children are basically walking mud pies, occasionally rinsed if they fall into a stream. Their only defence against disease is an immune system forged in filth. It all starts early. As soon as you're able to toddle, you're shooed outside, rain or shine, to play in the muck, dig in the kitchen garden, and roll around with the neighbour's equally sticky offspring. Bath time is reserved for true emergencies, like being mistaken for a turnip or coming home with a suspicious rash that can't be explained by growing pains. For the most part, mud is just a fact of life. Dirt under your nails, behind your ears, and occasionally in your dinner. Shoes are optional, and so is anything approaching supervision. If you're lucky, you might inherit a hand-me-down pair of lumpy socks, but odds are you're barefoot 9 months of the year. You learn quickly to dodge chicken droppings, avoid the nettle patch, and hop on one foot when you land in something even the family pig avoids. Stubbed toes and scraped knees are badges of honour, the mark of a childhood well spent. Clothing is more of a suggestion than a strict code. Linen shifts or rough woolen tunics are handed down, patched, and outgrown until they fall apart or become unrecognisable. On hot days, shirts are optional. On cold ones, you layer until you can barely move. Dirt doesn't stand a chance. It finds every gap, works its way into every seam, and sometimes emerges with a family of lice as stowaways. The only reliable way to get clean is a sudden, unexpected tumble into the stream or pond, and even then you're just swapping mud for a healthy sheen of pond scum. Sniffles, sneezes, and sniffing are as constant as the church bells. Tudor handkerchiefs are mostly sleeves, yours or a friend's, whichever is closer. If you have a cold, you're told to run around outside and sweat it out. Coughing is background music, and unless it's truly alarming, no one bothers to keep you home from work, chores, or games. After all, every other child is just as snotty, so there's no point worrying. Hygiene lessons, when they happen, are quick and to the point. Don't eat dirt that moves, don't lick the frog, and, for heaven's sake, don't put that in your ear. Bathing, when it can't be avoided, is a spectacle, water hauled, clothes scrubbed, and hair checked for whatever's nesting in it this week. Flea combs are passed around, and the act of nitpicking becomes both family bonding and a community service. It's just as common to see two children picking through each other's hair on the village green as it is to see them wrestling in the mud. For all the filth, Tudor children are nothing if not resilient. Immune systems are built not in a laboratory, but in the garden, the barn, and the pigsty. Cuts and scrapes are washed with whatever's handy, cold water, spit, or, if you're lucky, a splash of vinegar, and then ignored. Fevers are sweated out, coughs are soldiered through, and by the time you're 10, you're immune to everything except bedtime. Childhood chores only add to the layers of grime. You feed chickens, haul firewood, fetch water, and weed the garden, all without a thought for clean hands. If you do remember to wash, it's a splash in a shared bowl, quickly muddied by the next kid in line. By evening, your face may be smeared with jam, soot, or something from the compost heap, but at least you're alive, well-fed, and blissfully unconcerned. And when you finally collapse into bed, still caked in the day's adventures, you drift off, surrounded by the smell of sweat, hay, and whatever's left in your hair. You dream of rivers, fields, and endless games. Tomorrow you'll wake up, jump straight into the mud, and do it all over again. In Tudor England, childhood hygiene isn't about staying clean. It's about surviving, thriving, and getting just dirty enough to build a body that's ready for anything life and the pigsty can throw at it. You crawl into bed, exhausted and somehow even grubbier than before. The smell of sweat, straw, and stale air wraps around you like a medieval weighted blanket. Tomorrow you'll do it all again, and if you're lucky, you'll remember to thank history for hot showers. As the last embers in the hearth flicker and fade, the house settles into its nightly symphony of snores, shuffles, and the occasional suspicious creak. Darkness seeps through the thin window panes, mingling with the ever-present dust motes that never quite find their way out. Your straw mattress, lumpy and slightly damp, feels oddly comforting after a day of hard labour and harder living. You nestle in, the pokes and pricks a familiar reminder that at least you're not sleeping on bare planks tonight. There's no such thing as sleeping alone. If you're a peasant, you share your bed with siblings, parents, cousins, and, depending on how cold it gets, maybe a goat or a particularly friendly chicken. The family dog stakes out the warmest spot near your feet, while the cat finds the only pillow with less hay and more dignity. Every turn or wiggle produces a symphony of complaints from both the straw and your bedfellows. There's a quiet competition for the middle, drafts on the outside, elbows and knees on the inside. The air is heavy, humid with the efforts of a dozen bodies breathing, sweating, and occasionally whispering into the darkness. Any hopes for a gentle, lavender-scented bedtime are dashed by the mix of humanity, hay, and whatever managed to sneak in from the yard. There's a reason Tudor bedrooms come with a faint background scent of everything: stew, wood smoke, wet dog, and the not-so-distant aroma of chamber pots. If you're lucky, you haven't spilled the day's dinner down your shirt or trailed half the barn into bed with you. If you're less lucky, you find yourself sharing a pillow with a crust of bread or waking up with a mysterious smear on your sleeve. Changing into night clothes is a luxury for the rich. The rest of the world simply collapses in whatever they're wearing, hopefully, something that hasn't just been mended for the third time that month. Bedtime rituals are simple. A quick wash, if there's water left and it isn't frozen, a hurried prayer for protection against fleas and nightmares, and the ceremonial checking for extra guests under the covers. Flea combs are passed around, not for vanity, but for survival. If you find a bug, you squash it, flick it away, and move on. There's no energy left for outrage. Outside, the night is alive with sound. The distant bark of a dog, the muffled gossip of neighbours who don't know how to whisper, the moan of wind through the thatch. The darkness feels complete, pressing in on all sides, but inside, you're wrapped in a cocoon of familiar smells and warmth, even if it's not exactly what you'd wish for. Sleep comes quickly after a day of work, hunger, laughter, and grime. And as you drift off, you're comforted by the steady rise and fall of your family's breathing, the certainty that tomorrow will bring more of the same: work, dirt, and the small, steady joys of survival. Maybe, in your dreams, you find yourself in a world where beds are soft, sheets are clean, and water runs hot and cold at the turn of a tap. But when morning comes, you'll wake to another Tudor day, scratchy, smelly, and ready to face it all over again. After all, there's a certain satisfaction in ending the day with the scent of honest work and the hope of one more tomorrow. And if you're really lucky, you might just make it to Saturday, laundry day, where clean is a state of mind, and the world smells just a little fresher for an hour or two. Summer in Tudor England means you're marinating in your own juices, with layers of wool and linen acting more like a personal sauna suit than fashion. Winter? You bundle up until you can barely move, only to discover that cold wind has zero respect for your 27 layers. There's no perfect temperature, just a continuous cycle of sweating, freezing, and complaining quietly into your musty sleeve. Let's start with the joys of summer. The air is thick, muggy, and full of the smells that only a Tudor town can provide. Rotting vegetables from the market, animal droppings, and the general aroma of several hundred people trying their best with what little soap and water they have. Your clothing, chosen for modesty rather than comfort, consists of multiple layers of linen undergarments and sturdy wool on top. The theory is that these layers protect you from the sun. The reality is, you sweat through them before breakfast and spend the rest of the day trying not to pass out while working in the fields or at your craft. As the sun climbs higher, so does the collective body temperature. The fabric sticks to your skin, dust clings to every crevice, and any attempt at washing is instantly undone by another round of chores. Shade is rare, and the wind, when it blows, does nothing but swirl the smell of humanity from one end of the street to the other. For those lucky enough to live near a river, there's always the temptation to jump in, though you risk coming out with more than just cool skin. You might pick up a new rash, a frog, or a questionable sense of cleanliness. Personal hygiene in summer becomes a test of willpower. Baths are even less frequent because fetching water is exhausting in the heat, and nobody has time to boil enough to fill a tub. Sweat collects under your armpits, in the folds of your shirt, and in places you'd rather not discuss. Deodorant, herbs, petals, and prayer puts up a noble fight, but is swiftly overpowered by the relentless sun. Children run around barefoot and half-clothed, mud-splattered and wild-eyed, while adults trade stories of the worst heat waves in living memory, each one sweatier than the last. But as soon as you've adjusted to life as a human stew, the seasons turn, and winter barrels in like a tax collector on a mission. Now, instead of peeling off damp layers, you pile them on: shirts, vests, skirts, breeches, stockings, and every available scrap of wool. You wrap yourself in a cloak or two, shove your feet into boots stuffed with straw, and pray the icy wind doesn't find the hole in your only pair of gloves. Heating is a luxury for the wealthy and a distant dream for everyone else. The hearth provides the only real warmth in the house. And even then, you huddle as close as possible while keeping one eye on the billowing smoke that never seems to find its way up the chimney. Bedtime means piling under blankets with family, pets, and any livestock you can sneak in. You wake to frozen breath and a nose so cold it feels like it might snap off. Getting dressed is an act of courage, peeling off last night's slightly damp shirt and diving into the day's outfit, praying your toes will thaw by lunchtime. Hygiene becomes heroic in the winter. Washing anything, hands, face, or, heaven forbid, your whole body, means bracing for the shock of icy water. Most people make do with a quick rub of a cold, damp rag and a promise to try harder in the spring. Even the most ambitious give up on laundry until the thaw, as clothes never really dry but simply freeze into new, inventive shapes on the line. Through it all, there's one constant, a running commentary on the weather, complaining about the cold, the heat, and everything in between is the Tudor equivalent of small talk, therapy, and sport. You bond with neighbours over shared suffering, swap tips for surviving the next frost or heat wave, and daydream of a world where someone, somewhere, has discovered central heating. In the end, surviving Tudor seasons is a matter of endurance and adaptation, a never-ending dance between sweat and shivers. If you can laugh at your misfortune, wrap up tight, and accept that comfort is a modern invention, you'll get through. And when you finally crawl into bed, sticky in summer, frozen in winter, you thank your lucky stars for another day survived, however sweaty or shivery it might have been. Thirsty? That glimmering river looks inviting, until you remember it's also the neighbourhood's trash can, laundry tub, and occasional emergency toilet. Every sip of water is a gamble between quenching your thirst and spending a week in bed with the mysterious Tudor tummy terrors. Washing in it? Bold? Surviving it? Braver still. Water is both a blessing and a blight in Tudor England, a daily necessity that must be approached with caution, optimism, and a strong immune system. From city to countryside, everyone needs water to drink, cook, clean, and, when there's nothing better, take a half-hearted stab at personal hygiene. The problem? The stuff that comes out of your local stream or the Thames isn't exactly what you'd call refreshing. In fact, it's a minor miracle if you manage to drink it and keep your breakfast down. Let's start with the drinking situation. Clean, fresh water is a unicorn in most towns. The wells are prone to contamination, especially if the privy is closer than you'd like, and the rivers, while scenic, double as communal dumps. Chamber pots are emptied with remarkable aim out the window, usually in the general direction of any convenient stream. Laundry is done on the banks, while the local livestock wade in for a quick drink and leave their own unique signature behind. If it's not the colour of weak tea, it's probably because it's just been raining. The sensible Tudors know better than to trust what's in their mug. Instead, they boil water when they can, or better yet, they drink small beer. Not just for celebrations, small beer is a very weak, barely alcoholic brew that's safe enough for children, grandmas, and anyone with a lingering distrust of river water. If you're wealthier, you might have access to wine or ale at every meal, which at least means you're less likely to wake up with dysentery and more likely to wake up with a headache. But even washing is a high-risk, high-reward activity. The urge to clean yourself or your clothes in the river is strong, especially in summer when the air is thick with the scent of unwashed humanity. You haul your linen to the riverbank and scrub, hoping that the gentle current will rinse away the stains, along with any lingering guilt about water quality. The truth is, anything washed in the Thames comes out with more character than it went in, sometimes with new stains you didn't start with. If you rinse your face, you just pray you don't get a mouthful. Bathing in river water is even braver. Children are regularly tossed in for a splash, emerging with sand in every fold and a story to tell. Adults tend to be more cautious, sticking to shallow edges or settling for a dry wash at home, with the smallest possible amount of water fetched in buckets. Winter presents its own challenge. Ice must be broken, fingers freeze, and you wonder whether it's really worth being clean when you might catch your death from the cold. Household chores involving water are done with the same mix of necessity and resignation. Cooking water is boiled, scummed, and sometimes strained through cloth in a ritual that feels more like a magical spell than food preparation. Dishes are rinsed, never really cleaned, and whatever's left behind is just seasoning for next time. Infants are given the weakest beer possible, or a splash of boiled water, but everyone keeps a wary eye on what's in the cup. For all the hazards, Tudors are nothing if not resourceful. Rainwater is caught in barrels for special uses, and if you're truly lucky, a nearby spring can save you from the worst of the city's flavoured options. When all else fails, you simply accept that a good day is one when the water tastes mostly like water, and a bad day is one when it's better to stick to ale and hope for the best. By nightfall, you're grateful for every day you survive the water woes of Tudor life. You go to bed thirsty, but not so thirsty that you risk the dubious contents of the nearest bucket. And if you wake up without a stomach ache, you quietly thank the universe, and maybe plan to risk the beer next time. In Tudor England, water is a gamble, but survival is the ultimate prize. So tonight, as you settle under your fresh sheets in a room that smells mostly like nothing at all, spare a soft thought for your Tudor ancestors, those champions of filth, the survivors of straw beds and chamber pots, the true masters of good enough hygiene. Remember the countless mornings they woke up already itchy, braved public privies that doubled as obstacle courses, and invented new ways to smell slightly less like pickled onions. Picture them inventing fashionable dirt, bargaining with lice, and scrubbing at stains with soap that could sand a boat. Think of all the nights they drifted off to sleep surrounded by the faint aroma of river water, rose petals, and pure stubbornness, dreaming of a future where a bath was not a near-death experience. It's easy to laugh at their struggles, and let's be honest, history doesn't get much funnier or grimmer than the saga of communal laundry day or the heartbreak of accidentally sitting on your own chamber pot. But somehow, in all their filth and creativity, they persevered. They built cities, fell in love, survived plagues, and handed down just enough wisdom and possibly a few lice for us to be here tonight, grateful for warm water, toothpaste, and showers that don't require holy dispensation. So as you listen to the hum of your fan and drift towards sleep, take a deep breath through your nose for old time's sake, and maybe whisper a quiet thank you to history's survivors. Their world was grimy, exhausting, and occasionally hilarious. But through it all, people just kept on living, loving, and inventing slightly more effective ways to clean their armpits. Because history, for all its mess, proves that humans are stubborn, hopeful, and endlessly inventive, even if it takes us a few centuries to realize that bathwater really should be changed more than once a season. Good night, and may your dreams be as peaceful and as fragrant as a freshly laundered Tudor bedsheet, whenever they got around to it. Sleep well.